Hey guys, tonight we curl up inside a tent pitched somewhere on the edge of nowhere, with the soft drumming of rain on canvas, and just enough damp creeping in to keep it real. You're zipped up, your socks are damp, the lantern's flickering like it's considering retirement, and outside, a low rumble of thunder grumbles like someone forgot to close the sky's fridge door. Inside? Just you, the storm, and whatever your imagination decides to do with it. You probably won't survive this without at least one deeply introspective thought about your life, your choices, and whether that sleeping bag is actually waterproof or just really optimistic. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Always fun to know who else is tucked in across the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first raindrop doesn't ask permission. It just lands on your tent's roof with a faint pap. Then another. Then 10. You're halfway through digging around in your pack for that totally waterproof flashlight. Spoiler, it's not. When the sky opens up like someone tipped a bucket. You step outside for just a second, 1 foot in a puddle already, and tilt your head up to the gray belly of the storm. The air smells like petrichor, wet earth and pine needles, and something old that feels like memory. Thunder mumbles in the distance like it's just getting warmed up. You pull your hoodie up even though, deep down, you know that doesn't make a difference. Not against this kind of rain. The kind that has historical ambitions. Rain has always had a weird hold on us. In ancient Greece, they believed Zeus hurled thunderbolts when he was annoyed, probably when someone forgot to offer him olive oil or broke his favorite vase. And in more grounded times, say, the Roman campaigns in Britannia, the legions would march through constant damp. Picture it. Muddy fields, armor rusting before lunch, and absolutely no chance of s'mores. You zip the tent closed behind you, like shutting a vault door. The patter of rain becomes instantly muffled. More intimate. You sit cross-legged on your sleeping pad, listening as the storm ramps up like it's getting comfortable too. Funny how even a paper-thin wall of nylon can make you feel oddly safe. Safer than you probably should feel, given the wind just made a sound like it punched a tree. Outside, the temperature dips slightly. You bundle into your sleeping bag with a little twist and hop maneuver that would embarrass you in public but works like magic here. There's a kind of joy in the simplicity. Being out in the wild, reduced to the basics. Warmth, dryness, snacks. You stare up at the ceiling of your tent, where a tiny drip has started forming in the corner seam. You put a mug under it like a very minimalist art installation. It makes a soft plink every few seconds. Somehow the sound adds to the rhythm, like the percussion section of this evening's storm symphony. Historians still argue whether early nomadic cultures chose their campsites based on shelter from storms or based on access to food. Some claim that river proximity mattered most. Others point out that flood risks made high ground preferable. Either way, you get it now. You would absolutely pick dry over scenic at this point. Although the pine trees silhouetted against the moody sky are giving some major Bob Ross vibes, you light a little LED lantern, and its glow flickers against the fabric walls. It's cozy, in that back-to-basics, you forgot to pack a real pillow kind of way. The rain's a little louder now. No angry hammering, more like fingers drumming thoughtfully. You imagine ancient traders huddled under camel hair tents in the desert, listening to a different kind of storm. Sand, not rain. Still, same feeling. Small, protected. A little unsure about what just moved near the flap. You open your journal, Not to write anything profound, just to doodle that same weird, lopsided dog face you've drawn since high school. Maybe it's the weather, but your brain starts to wander. Did you know Cleopatra supposedly had her own portable tent palace? Silk, gold trim, the works. When you compare that to your slightly moldy sleeping pad, it's kind of humbling. But then again, you didn't marry your brother to maintain power in a kingdom, so trade-offs. Another flash outside. You don't count the seconds before the thunder. It's too close to bother. It hits with a low, rolling boom that vibrates through the ground, through your bones, through history, honestly. You think of trench soldiers in World War I, drenched for weeks, boots rotting, nerves shredded. Some journals describe lightning as both a blessing and a curse. Lit the night up, but gave away positions. You've got a tent and trail mix. They had rats and shrapnel. Perspective is important. There's that comforting ache in your shoulders now. The kind that comes from walking all day with a pack that doesn't love you back. Your feet wiggle at the bottom of the sleeping bag like restless fish. You've tucked your hoodie behind your head as a makeshift pillow. There's something ritualistic about settling in like this, listening to the rain slowly lull the world into stillness. Even the insects seem to hush. And then, a single pine needle falls with a plink on your rainfly. Or maybe it's a chipmunk scouting for snacks. Either way, it's not your problem. Not tonight. The tent rustles a little in the wind, and you wonder, who first figured out this whole canvas stretched on poles situation? Tents go back thousands of years. Some say the earliest were made of mammoth hide. Try stuffing that in your pack. Others were reed huts by lakes, domed felt structures on the steppes of Central Asia. Each variation a different answer to the same question. How do you keep yourself warm, dry, and just slightly smug about not sleeping out in the open? The rain keeps falling. Your breathing slows. The storm's not angry. It's just doing its thing. And so are you. You wake up to the sound of zipper teeth being unzipped, your own hand tugging open the tent flap just enough to peek outside. It's early evening still, that weird hour where the light is gray and directionless, like someone dimmed the whole forest. Rain's coming down steady now, soaking into pine needles, turning dry dirt into slosh. You hesitate before stepping out. Your socks? Already damp? Your shoes? Let's call them moist. But you need to finish setting up the tent before everything gets actually miserable. It's that special kind of rain that doesn't slam. It whispers in a billion tiny drops, which somehow feels more ominous. Every time you turn your back to grab something from the pack, it feels like the weather increases in sarcasm. You grab the last tent pole, which of course has wedged itself awkwardly behind your camp stove. You're pretty sure the instruction sheet blew into a puddle 20 minutes ago, but no worries. You can definitely figure out which pole goes into which sleeve without it, right? Right? Historical side note. Tents have been confusing people for centuries. Alexander the Great reportedly traveled with a field tent so large it had separate rooms. Some believe it had actual flooring. Now imagine trying to set that thing up during a downpour with no IKEA-style picture diagrams. Historians still argue whether that particular tent was designed for practicality or sheer intimidation. But either way, you wouldn't trade it for your current struggle against this aggressive nylon octopus. You stab the last pole into its grommet, and for a moment, it looks like the tent might implode. You pause. One deep breath. You lean your whole weight into it, and suddenly, miraculously, the structure pops into place like a reluctant jellyfish finally getting its act together. Victory. You whisper a half-sarcastic, "Behold my fortress," to a nearby squirrel who is absolutely judging your tarp layout. A puddle has already formed next to your sleeping spot. You do your best to shift the floor liner away from it. but the earth is soft and spongy. It's nature's version of a waterbed, minus the comfort. You toss your pack into the driest corner and collapse onto your foam pad like you've just conquered Everest. Except Everest is wet, mildly uneven, and smells vaguely of bug spray. You glance around your mini-shelter and decide. It's time to declare war on the wetness. You unpack your gear with the urgency of someone defusing a very soggy bomb. Sleeping bag. Still dry. Kind of. Your quick-dry towel is wet from the last time it quick-dried. Socks? You find one clinging to the inside of your food bag like it gave up on being a sock and decided to be cheesecloth. You hang things wherever you can, on tent loops, trekking poles, and that one tiny twig you wedged inside the rainfly like an impromptu clothesline. It's all very rustic. Pinterest would not approve. While fumbling around, your fingers brush something metal, an old tin mug. You haven't used it in ages, but it feels right to hold now. It clinks softly as you turn it in your hand, and you imagine early mountain men or fur traders doing the same in weather like this. The mug is battered, the handle slightly warped, but there's something comforting in its dented reliability. There's a fringe theory that some pre-Columbian tribes used metal not just for tools, but to create musical tones in the rain, hanging bells or sheets to collect sound in the wet season. It's not well documented, but that idea, the blend of function and music, feels very human. You tap the rim of your mug once, hear the high ping against the deeper sound of water drumming on your shelter, and for a moment, everything sinks. A breeze rolls through the clearing. It lifts the edges of your rainfly like a ghost with attitude. You shuffle over and restake it, reinforcing the corners with rocks that are too slippery to trust but too nearby to ignore. You look around at your domain. Slanted ground, damp gear, half-stuck zipper, and feel surprisingly proud. This little slice of forest chaos is yours. You built it. You made it mostly waterproof. You probably earned a wilderness badge for sheer tenacity, or at least a participation trophy in the didn't panic yet category. You settle back down, ducking inside the tent again. The rain has intensified now, a steady, almost hypnotic percussion on the canvas. Your fingers drum along with it, just a lazy rhythm to keep time. Somewhere, lightning flashes. You wait for the thunder. 3 seconds. Then it growls, low and slow, like the clouds are shifting in their sleep. Historians still debate whether thunder and lightning were seen as divine punishment or cosmic communication. The ancient Maya believed lightning was wielded by gods with axes, splitting the sky. Some Viking legends suggest it was Thor riding across the heavens in his goat-pulled chariot. Yes, goat-pulled, because even Norse gods had a sense of whimsy. You lay back, stretching a little, and start counting how many parts of your body feel damp. You lose count around left elbow pit. But it doesn't matter much now. The tent's holding. The storm hasn't escalated into drama. And there's something deeply human about huddling against nature's noise in a structure you wrestled into place with your own hands. You run your fingers along the seams of the tent roof, tracing the geometry of this tiny fabric triangle you've claimed. The rain sounds almost organized now, like a living metronome, clicking you into stillness. You think of early mountaineers on Everest or K2, tying themselves to ice and canvas in hopes the wind wouldn't peel them off the earth. Their tents were miracles of engineering and absolute nightmares to sleep in. Yours, while less extreme, carries the same purpose: shelter, comfort, maybe even a bit of courage. A drip hits your wrist and you squint up. The same leak, still dripping, still yours. You laugh quietly and mutter to yourself, 10 out of 10. Would camp again. Outside, the forest settles into its nighttime rhythm. Wind pushing against leaves, a branch creaking like it's trying to speak. A frog starts chirping somewhere deep in the brush. It's imperfect, soggy, a little absurd, and perfect in the only way real things can be. The rain doesn't let up. It just changes tone. From scattered patter to soft sheets brushing across your rainfly like silk dragging across a drum. You shuffle a bit deeper into the tent. The scent of damp earth and melted trail mix wafting faintly in the air. It's the kind of atmosphere that calls for stories, the kind whispered around glowing embers with people leaning in just close enough to believe something impossible. You light your little lantern again, and it flickers a warm amber, making shadows dance against the tent walls like they're listening in. No fire tonight, not with everything this soaked, but that won't stop your brain from sparking. You settle in, back against your rolled-up jacket, and start spinning tales to no one in particular, or maybe to the storm itself. You start with the one about the Roman soldiers stationed in northern Britain. Those poor guys posted to Hadrian's Wall, who spent most of their lives fighting off boredom, cold, and whatever local tribe decided today was a good day to throw a spear. These soldiers came from sun-drenched provinces, North Africa, Italy, the Mediterranean, and were suddenly shipped off to foggy, wet Britain, where the only sunshine came from daydreams. Imagine, you say softly, your voice nearly swallowed by the rain. You're a centurion used to olives and togas, and now you're knee-deep in mud, building walls with frozen fingers while wondering what the heck a bog is. Historians still argue whether those soldiers were miserable or just quietly resigned. Some records suggest the Romans actually adapted pretty well, building bathhouses, roads, even heated floors. Others imply the weather wore them down into chilly ghosts with good posture. You're not sure which version feels more accurate tonight. You pause, listening to the rhythm outside. The rain's changed again, more persistent now, like a drum line marching through the trees. It reminds you of a fringe tale you once read, that a few early Roman forts supposedly used rain catchers, not just for drinking water, but to mimic the sound of home. Little pools were placed under awnings, so that water dripping into them echoed like fountains in Rome. Was it true? Who knows? But it's a beautiful idea, trying to trick your ears into feeling comfort. Outside your tent, something squelches in the mud. Not threatening. Probably just a raccoon or a frog with delusions of grandeur. You glance toward the shadow moving past your tent and raise an eyebrow. Not now, you murmur. Story time. You shift gears. A new tale bubbles up. Not Roman this time, American frontier style. Picture a campfire crackling just outside an old canvas tent in the Appalachian wilderness. The years may be 1810. A scout sits hunched over a flame, spinning yarns to his companions about how the Cherokee believe thunder is born from the wings of giant birds flapping high above the clouds. You add your own spin. Maybe those wings are flapping now, you whisper, just as another roll of thunder lumbers across the sky. The timing's so perfect, you glance around like the clouds might be eavesdropping. Inside your tent, your breath starts fogging slightly in the cooler air. You pull the sleeping bag tighter, the fabric crinkling like dry leaves. There's something addictive about this kind of night, when the only things that exist are sound and imagination. You keep telling yourself it's just rain, just stories, but your brain wants to wander. You imagine a tent like this in the trenches of World War I, surrounded by muck, lit by cigarette ends instead of lanterns. Soldiers wrapped in wool blankets, trading ghost stories, describing home, pretending they're not cold or terrified, or praying the shelling holds off. Some letters from the front mention rain so constant it felt like it soaked into the bones. That kind of wet doesn't wash off. You carry it with you forever. Historians still debate the psychological toll of weather during wartime. Was it the noise, the chill, or just the endless gray? You can't help but feel a shadow of it tonight. Yours is cozy discomfort, but theirs was the kind that rewrote you. The lantern dims a bit, battery doing its dramatic goodbye performance. You let it fade, letting your eyes adjust to the shadows, lit only by flickers of lightning far off in the clouds. They glow like distant camera flashes, capturing moments that only the trees can see. You're not done with stories. Your fingers trace patterns in the condensation beading on the tent wall. You switch to a legend from Japan, the tale of Raijin, the thunder god who drums the clouds with his massive taiko. Some say if you hear a strange thumping in a storm, it's Raijin reminding you that the heavens still have rhythm. You drum your fingers softly against your knee. Boom, 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 boom. In the silence after, you hear the light scratching of tree branches swaying nearby. Not quite music, not quite random. You're convinced the forest has its own playlist tonight, one of soft percussion, ambient vocals, and just a little existential dread. The rain slackens. Briefly, a moment to breathe, you close your eyes and listen for something deeper, for the sigh of trees, for distant animal chatter, for the world settling into sleep. Somewhere off in the wet blackness, an owl calls once, then silence, then again. It's rhythmic, like a metronome for dreams. You murmur another story, this one barely a whisper, about nomadic Bedouins who used oral storytelling as shelter in itself. On stormy desert nights, they'd gather in tents layered with wool, reciting epic poems that outlasted the rain. Some of those tales are still told, passed down with flourishes and firelight. Others faded, lost in the static of time. You wonder briefly if your own little story tonight, your half-damp adventure, your whispered thunder tales, might become part of your own personal mythology. The kind of thing you'll remember when someone asks, "Ever camped in a storm?" You'll grin and say, "Yeah. Once, everything was soaked, but the stories were dry. Another crack of thunder, closer this time. Not dangerous, just loud enough to rattle your spine." You exhale, long and slow, and then you whisper, "One last time tonight." And that's when the tent started to talk back. The tent doesn't actually talk back, of course, but when the wind picks up and the rain shifts direction, it feels like it could. The walls bow inward with each gust, and the guy lines outside quiver like a harp being plucked by ghost fingers. You lie still, staring up at the faint glow of your rainfly, listening to your humble shelter breathe in and out with the forest. A branch snaps somewhere to the right, not a loud crack, but just sharp enough to make you freeze. Then silence, just long enough to make you wonder if you imagined it. Then another snap, closer this time. Could be wind, could be wildlife, could be something else. You chuckle under your breath. "Okay, nope," you say aloud, reaching for your flashlight and clicking it on with all the authority of someone who's definitely not just a tiny bit panicked. The circle of light bounces off the inner wall of your tent, and you're reminded, once again, how thin nylon is, how every flap and seam is just a suggestion between you and whatever is outside. You listen harder. Still nothing. Just the rain, ticking again like a metronome for nerves. You settle back in, slowly, the flashlight dimming to a warm pulse in your hand. "Just squirrels," you say, "or deer, or raccoons with unresolved issues. The forest is full of tiny, loud-footed roommates. You're the visitor here." You shift your thoughts deliberately, back to history, back to stories, back to people who camped long before waterproof zippers or bug-repellent wipes. You remember reading about the Mongol Empire, how Genghis Khan and his armies lived out of yurts. Round, portable, sturdy as stone huts but collapsible in hours. Entire cities on horseback. During rainy nights on the steppe, those yurts held families, warriors, and the occasional goat who forgot it wasn't part of the furniture. Historians still argue whether the Mongols' military dominance was due more to their tactics or their mobility. But most agree those yurts, insulated with felt, reinforced with wood, and designed to resist the elements, were minor miracles of engineering. Imagine riding all day, conquering a village or two, then tucking into a warm, felt home where your dinner stew simmers quietly over a fire. You poke your head out the tent door just long enough to confirm, no Mongol warriors out there tonight, just puddles. And a very opinionated frog near your boots who does not approve of your camping technique. You zip back up and dig out your journal, soft cover, a little wrinkled from the damp, but still usable. You jot a few lines about the storm, the shadows, the squirrel conspiracies. And because it feels appropriate, you draw a quick sketch of a Mongol yurt with a satellite dish on top, just in case they ever want Netflix. Lightning again, this time a little brighter. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're inside one of those yurts. Thick wool above you, the scent of firewood and yak butter in the air. Outside, the steppe stretches for miles. Endless wind and grass and movement. You're safe. Dry. Centered. Back in your own reality, you hear something new. Water dripping into water. Not rain on canvas, but the plip-plip of accumulated droplets finally falling off a branch into a growing puddle. The sound is oddly comforting, like nature's version of a clock ticking. You start thinking about explorers now, the kind who disappeared into jungles with nothing but a compass and a questionable understanding of waterproof. Like Percy Fawcett, the British cartographer who ventured into the Amazon in 1925 and vanished without a trace. Some say he was eaten by jaguars, others believe he found a lost city and stayed. One wild theory even suggests he founded a hidden utopia based on telepathy. Because, history. Fawcett's journals talked about storms that raged for days, mud that swallowed boots, and insects with personal vendettas. You imagine his canvas tent, pitched under dripping jungle foliage, the air thick with humidity and suspense. No glow-in-the-dark zipper pulls for him. Just darkness and whatever was breathing beyond it. Historians still debate whether Fawcett was a visionary or just deeply unprepared. Either way, you hope he had at least one dry pair of socks. You pull yours off and wring them out for the third time. It's more ceremonial at this point than effective. The fabric flops like a sad fish. You hang them again on your improvised clothesline, held up by 2 hair ties and sheer optimism. Outside, the wind dies down. The trees stop swaying. And for a few moments it feels like the world is holding its breath. You hold yours too, listening. No thunder, no frogs. Just silence, so deep you can hear your own pulse behind your ears. Then, like a switch flipping, the rain starts again. Not a whisper this time, a roar, buckets pouring from the sky, as if the clouds lost their patience and decided to dump the rest of the storm all at once. The tent shudders. You laugh, quietly, helplessly. "This is fine," you say to no one. In that way, people do right before something isn't. You check the seams, still holding. You pat the sleeping bag, still dry-ish. And your pack? Elevated on a rock like a makeshift altar, safe from most of the flood. It's ridiculous, but it's kind of magic. You're in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a storm, wrapped in layers of synthetic fabric and storybook bravado. The forest doesn't care who you are. The rain doesn't wait for your permission. And yet, you're here, unbothered, cozy even. You tuck your journal away, zip up the sleeping bag, and lie back again. The roof above you drums louder now, like dozens of fingers tapping a symphony only nature understands. You murmur one last thought before drifting. If the tent does talk back, I hope it's got a British accent. The night deepens, and the rain, for all its theater, begins to settle into something hypnotic. You lie still, cocooned in warmth, lulled by the rhythmic percussion of droplets drumming your little portable roof. It's no longer a threat, just background music, like that lo-fi hip-hop playlist everyone swears by, except curated by clouds and composed entirely of wet. You exhale slowly. A little mist floats from your breath, visible in the flashlight's glow. You turn it off, letting your eyes adjust to the low light of the lantern again. Everything's shadows and outlines now. Even your thoughts come quieter, like they're walking barefoot. From this dim cave of nylon and zippers, you imagine the world outside. Not the one with grocery stores and inboxes and group chats, but the one that existed centuries ago, when tents weren't optional and rain wasn't background ambiance. When entire cultures were built around mobility, survival, and weather that didn't care how tired you were. You think of the Sami people in Scandinavia, the indigenous reindeer herders of the Arctic Circle. Their lavish, cone-shaped tents made of wooden poles and reindeer hides have been used for centuries. They're like teepees, but built to survive snowstorms instead of prairie winds. Inside, families would gather close, sharing heat, stories, and smoked fish that you imagine was an acquired taste. Historians still argue whether the Sami lifestyle changed more from external contact or from internal evolution. But one thing's agreed upon. They knew how to live in sync with nature. You imagine what it would be like to crawl into a lavu on a night like this, the snow swirling outside instead of rain, a fire crackling in the center, and the hides overhead thick enough to mute the world. You shift in your sleeping bag, which is unfortunately not made of reindeer anything. It makes a loud crinkle, like a bag of chips being opened in a silent movie theater. Somewhere outside, an animal rustles in the underbrush again. You're 90% sure it's still that disapproving frog, 10% sure it's Bigfoot with dietary restrictions. You pull the bag tighter. Your mind wanders again, this time to a different continent, to the Bedouins of the Middle East, whose black tents, woven from goat hair, are said to blend with the desert and shed rain with surprising grace. They're made to breathe in heat and insulate in cold. Inside, rugs line the floor, cushions line the walls, and stories bounce from person to person like coals passed between fire circles. A fringe account claims that in particularly fierce storms, Bedouins used a song of shelter, a kind of group chant that unified their nerves and calmed their camels. Whether it was practical or poetic is unclear. Historians debate if the chant was real or romanticized by early travel writers. But wouldn't it be something if your Spotify playlist could actually hold your tent together? The rain outside softens again. That gentle shh returns, the sound of nature rocking itself to sleep. You close your eyes for a moment and let it carry you, like waves in a warm bath. Your thoughts start to do that drifting thing, where images become untethered from logic, and you find yourself thinking about whether ducks like rain, or how long it would take to build a house out of lasagna noodles, or what would happen if tents could get soggy like cereal. But then something pulls you back, a real memory this time, one you'd forgotten until now. A camping trip as a kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old. You and your parent, probably dad, though memory gets fuzzy, trying to pitch a tent in the backyard during a drizzle. You remember the tarp being upside down, the stakes bending like paper clips, and the hot cocoa after. The cocoa tasted like cardboard and marshmallows, but it was warm, and that was enough. You smile into the darkness. It's weird what sticks. Not the mess or the mistakes, but the sounds. The way the rain hit the tarp, The way the tent smelled like grass and plastic. The way the world shrank to just you and the storm, and a dim light inside a tiny fort. Back in the present, your body starts to sink deeper into the mat. Your limbs feel heavier. Not from fatigue exactly, just peace. Just that slow fade of tension as your senses realize they don't need to be on high alert anymore. You whisper a fact aloud, because your brain still wants something to chew on. Did you know the first known waterproof fabric was developed in China using waxed silk umbrellas? Your voice is soft, like you're explaining it to the raindrops themselves. Another strange tidbit bubbles up, uninvited. Some early Arctic explorers used seal intestines as windproof tent flaps, like literal intestines. You pause, wrinkle your nose, and add, "That's a hard pass." Outside, the wind gusts again, gentle this time, like a sigh. The trees creak, the tent flutters, but everything holds. You roll onto your side, listening now not to the storm, but to the silence between the raindrops. The little spaces of stillness that feel more musical than any sound. Historians still argue whether sleep under canvas is more restorative because of nature's white noise, or because it resets something primal. Either way it works. You can feel it happening. The letting go, the quieting, the long exhale of the soul. Your breath slows, your eyes drift shut, and the storm, steady and soft, becomes the heartbeat of the forest. It's probably around 2 a.m. now, though you haven't checked. Time's gone a little fuzzy, wrapped in the blanket of this storm. Rain has no respect for clocks anyway. It just falls when it pleases. You shift slightly in your sleeping bag, not because you're uncomfortable, quite the opposite, but because some part of you is still tethered to the world outside. Listening, just in case the forest has something else to say. There's a rhythm to it now. The rain, the wind, the rustle of branches. It's like the trees are telling each other bedtime stories, whispering old jokes and folklore while they sway. You imagine one ancient oak saying to a birch, "Remember that time in 1348 when squirrels chewed through my bark?" Classic. And speaking of classic, you start thinking about some of the first known tent dwellers in recorded history, the Scythians. Nomadic warriors from the steppes of Central Asia, famous for their horsemanship and for drinking the blood of their enemies. You know, typical overachievers. Their tents were simple, functional, often assembled with whatever animal hides they had on hand, and designed for speed. They were like history's version of pop-up campers, minus the cup holders. What's interesting is that historians still argue whether the Scythians were more culturally sophisticated than they were given credit for, or just brutal survivalists who happened to be good at mobile warfare. Archaeological digs have unearthed beautifully detailed gold jewelry buried alongside weapons, so either they were fashion-conscious warriors or ancient Etsy sellers with boundary issues. You picture them, centuries ago, sitting around a fire in a hide tent. Rain pounding the grassland outside, their horses huddled together nearby. Inside, maybe a story is being passed down. Maybe someone's playing a flute made of bone. Maybe a teenager is sulking in the corner because their bowstring snapped and nobody understands them. You smile at the thought and tuck your hands beneath your sleeping bag. The air inside is warm now, like your own little climate bubble. You shift your feet, brushing against your sock that's still hanging on the makeshift clothesline. Spoiler, it's no drier than it was an hour ago. At this point, it's more of a humidity sponge than actual clothing. The tent shivers again in the breeze. This time you don't flinch. You know its voice now. You can tell the difference between a casual gust and a weather tantrum. You whisper to it, "You're doing great, buddy." The tent doesn't respond, but it doesn't collapse either, so you're counting that as mutual respect. You reach over and pull your pack a little closer, just in case. Not that you're planning to bolt into the woods in your pajamas, but hey, if history has taught us anything, it's that you never know when a rampaging boar or time-traveling Viking might crash your campsite. That gets you thinking. Vikings? Yeah, those guys knew a thing or two about bad weather. Rain? Pfft. Try sailing the North Sea in open boats with names like Skidbladnir and Ravager. When they came ashore, their tents were usually made of woolen cloth stretched over oaken frames, simple, effective, and just slightly soggy. There's an old Norse poem, its authorship disputed naturally, that mentions travelers tying down their tents with ropes woven from horsehair and seaweed. Whether that's poetic metaphor or practical advice, no one really knows. Historians still debate the line. The storm humbles men, but praises a well-bound roof. Probably would have made a great Yelp review. You can picture it vividly. Vikings stomping ashore, setting up their cloth tents, and grumbling about wet tunics and soggy bread. One guy's trying to start a fire with flint and wet moss, another's carving runes into a wooden bowl, and someone in the corner is already 3 meads in and declaring he could take on Thor himself. Classic campsite energy. The idea of weather bonding people is ancient and oddly comforting. Every society, every time period, every continent, rain happens. And when it does, people huddle, improvise, and eventually share stories. It's humanity's least glamorous but most consistent group activity. You sit up slightly and zip down the tent door a few inches, just enough to peek out. Everything outside glistens. Rain has pooled in little reflective pockets across the ground. Branches glimmer under moonlight, and the air is thick with petrichor, that fresh, earthy smell that only comes after rain. It's like the ground sighing, grateful for the drink. You breathe it in. You're not even cold anymore, just aware, present. A sudden thump to your left, brief but distinct. You freeze, then wait. A few seconds later, the unmistakable sound of a deer snorting. Not a scary snort. More like an "oh, you're still here" kind of vibe. You smile and whisper, "Hey, buddy," though you know it's already vanished into the trees. Nature doesn't ask for your approval, but it also doesn't mind your company, as long as you behave. You zip the tent back up and lean into your sleeping bag again, sinking down, feeling the ground beneath you like a weighted cradle. You start to hum, softly. Not a song, exactly, just a note or two, something to thread the silence with. It's what people have always done in tents, hummed, prayed, talked to themselves, made wishes, recited poetry or grocery lists or confessions to the wind. One last historical note floats to mind before sleep begins to anchor you again. In the American Civil War, soldiers used canvas tents they called dog tents, small, cramped, and shared between 2 people. Many wrote in letters about how the rain made them feel either homesick or philosophical. Some wrote poetry about the sound of rain on canvas. Others just complained about wet shoes and soggy hardtack. Both are valid. You reach for your water bottle, sip once, and tuck it back beside your pillow. It's the last thing you'll do tonight. The storm has softened now into a lullaby, and your brain is already slipping sideways, thought by thought. No more deer. No more Scythians. No more Vikings. Just you, your brave little tent, and the ancient choir of raindrops that for 1 more hour promise to keep singing you to sleep. You wake up, or maybe you never really slept. It's that in-between space where time folds over itself like a damp towel. The rain is softer now, more like a whisper than a song, and everything inside the tent feels warmer, quieter, thicker. You blink into the darkness, not quite ready to move. Your breath is calm. The forest breathes with you. You hear a faint plop of water sliding off a leaf, followed by the gentle sigh of wind brushing the treetops. the occasional creak of a branch, the rustle of something nocturnal stepping on damp pine needles. It's all strangely intimate, like the forest is speaking in its sleep, and you've accidentally tuned into its dream frequency. You stretch a little, careful not to disturb the integrity of your sleeping bag's burrito configuration. Your toes nudge against the edge, and you remember, yep, still damp socks on the line. They're evolving into sentient beings at this point, probably applying for a tax ID number. Still, you're warm, dry enough, alive. And in a tent, so technically you're winning. Your thoughts drift to ancient travel again. Not epic battles or dramatic escapes this time, just the quiet resilience of people who made peace with weather, like the Mongol yurts, round, sturdy tents designed to stand up to brutal steppe winds and easily taken down when the grass dried up and the horses needed new pastures. Genghis Khan probably spent more nights in a tent than in any palace. Picture him curled up under layers of wool, snoring softly while guards doze outside beside their horses. The yurt wasn't just a shelter. It was a status symbol. Some were lavish, decorated with silk wall hangings, others just bone and felt. But every one of them was a testament to mobility, to adaptability, to saying okay when nature throws a tantrum. Historians still debate how much of the Mongol Empire's power came from their ability to live on the move. The tents, after all, weren't just homes. They were mobile command centers. You wonder what your tent says about you. Minimalist nomad? Budget overnighter? Someone who read half a blog post and said, "Yeah, I can do this." You glance around your own space again. The crinkled granola bar wrapper. The tiny LED lantern casting a halo on the roof. The wet sock that now feels like a roommate. You smile. This is your yurt now. Mongol chic. Outside, the rain starts up again. Not heavy, just consistent. The kind of rain that doesn't demand attention but insists on being part of the mood. You close your eyes and try to count the seconds between drips. It's impossible. Rain has no rhythm until you stop trying to find one. Then it becomes music. A breeze sneaks in under the fly sheet and carries with it that cool, washed smell of pine and wet moss. It hits your face, and you breathe in, letting it ground you. You've got no deadlines here, no Wi-Fi, no unread notifications yelling for attention. Just weather, and the shelter you put up with your own hands. Okay, and maybe a YouTube tutorial or two. You start thinking about medieval pilgrims. The real deal. Blistered feet, hand-stitched cloaks, scallop shells tied to their belts. On their way to Canterbury or Santiago or Rome, walking hundreds of miles on faith and sheer stubbornness. Their tents were primitive if they had any at all, usually just a canvas draped over a stick, if that. Most of them slept under the stars, praying it wouldn't rain. Spoiler, it often did. There's a surviving 14th century manuscript that shows a traveling friar huddled beneath what looks suspiciously like a tablecloth. Some scholars say it was symbolic. Others think it was just bad tent design. Historians still argue whether pilgrims avoided tents altogether to prove their devotion, or simply because carrying one was impractical and made you look like a medieval diva. You picture yourself as one of them now. Mud-caked boots, walking stick, holy relic in your pocket, muttering about damp bread and divine lessons in patience. You'd probably make a great pilgrim, especially if there was coffee at the next monastery stop. You smile and shift again, hearing the light rustle of nylon. It's strange how peaceful it feels to be vulnerable out here, to know you're just one zipper away from the entire wilderness, and yet entirely okay with it. There's a kind of strength in surrendering to the elements, letting the world be bigger than you, trusting your little patch of fabric to hold, and your body to rest. A quirky fact floats to mind. Some cultures used animal bladders as waterproof tent windows. Yup, transparent, durable, and weirdly effective. There's something hilariously human about that. Let's take this organ and turn it into a skylight. No notes. The tent trembles slightly as another gust rolls through, but you don't flinch this time. The wind is part of the cast now. A recurring character. Not scary, just opinionated, like a retired professor who occasionally taps the table to make a point. You reach for your flashlight, click it on, then off. Just testing. You don't need it right now. You've adjusted to the dark. Or maybe it's adjusted to you. Sleep nudges your shoulder again. You let it. And just before your thoughts slide back into the slow drift of dreams, you whisper something to the tent, like a spell or a promise, or maybe just gratitude dressed in words. You're doing great. We both are. Outside, the rain keeps falling. And the forest, the history, the ancient memory of tents and travel and weathered souls, it all leans in a little closer, keeping watch as you disappear once more into sleep. Somewhere between dreams and waking, you become aware of your breath again, slow, steady, warm against the chilled air. You don't open your eyes right away. You let the quiet soak into you first. Not silence, exactly. Just a quieter kind of noise. A softened rain. A gentler wind. A night that's finally run out of dramatic monologues and is content to hum in the background. Your hand, sticking slightly out of the sleeping bag, brushes the tent floor. It's dry. Not bone dry, obviously. This is camping, not a Marriott, but dry enough to remind you that your tent has held up. Still your humble, zippered fortress. You murmur, "Nice work, buddy," to the walls again. At this point, you're basically co-parenting this experience with the tent. It's the kind of peacefulness that people crave without realizing it. This middle-of-the-night stillness, where your mind has finally stopped trying to optimize anything. No tabs open, no texts incoming, no decisions waiting. Just fabric, forest, and the low, steady percussion of weather. You stretch slightly, careful not to jostle your makeshift clothesline. Yep. Sock still there. Still damp. Probably applying to grad school by now. And just when you think sleep might reclaim you for another round, your mind does that delightful, completely unsolicited thing where it invites historical rabbit holes. You go willingly, of course. Who could resist? Tonight's time jump? The Bedouins? The true desert tent legends. You think of them now, moving across dunes with camels and cooking pots, folding and unfolding their Beit al-Sha'ar, or House of Hair. Not metaphorical. They wove their tents from goat and camel hair. It was waterproof when it rained. Rare in the desert, but still a possibility. And it allowed heat to escape during the blistering days while retaining warmth at night. Honestly, if that doesn't qualify as high-performance fabric, what does? Historians still argue whether the weaving of these tents was more of a gendered craft tradition or an economic necessity. But the skill itself was revered. Families passed down weaving techniques like heirlooms. The black and white patterns weren't just for aesthetics. They signaled tribal identity, lineage, and status. Imagine walking through ancient Arabia and spotting someone's tent from a distance, knowing instantly whether to stop for tea or keep riding. And yes, there was always tea. It wasn't just hospitality. It was ritual. Even strangers were welcomed, their arrival part of a shared desert code. You can almost hear it. The soft clink of metal cups, the hiss of water over coals, the flap of tent walls lifting in the breeze. You wonder what they'd make of your nylon cocoon. Probably a few polite questions. Maybe an offer to swap it for a sturdy bundle of goat hair panels, and a story about surviving a sandstorm with nothing but dates and a prayer. Back in your forest clearing, a light patter resumes above. Not heavy, just persistent. You picture the tent ceiling overhead like a living thing, its fibers straining slightly, stretching against each drop. And somehow, it feels comforting, like it's flexing its muscles for you, reassuring you, I got this. You shift again and pull the sleeping bag tighter around your shoulders, feeling the insulation hug your back like a gentle weight. You've always liked this part, the gentle pressure, like someone's tucking you in without asking questions. No words, just warmth. You hear something scurry nearby, probably a raccoon, maybe a mouse. Either way, it's not your business. Unless it starts playing dice with your granola bars, you're letting it go. Your thoughts drift again, this time to the American frontier. Picture the 1800s. Dusty wagons, cast-iron skillets, weathered hands, settlers heading west, dreaming of land and potatoes and maybe just a bit of freedom from whatever drama they left behind. Their tents were often repurposed wagon covers, white canvas stretched over curved wooden frames. Practical, but hardly luxurious. They leaked, they sagged, and they were perpetually damp. But they were also symbols of movement, of ambition, of entire families betting everything on a patch of land that may or may not support beans. And get this. Some diaries describe sleeping arrangements where the kids were tucked into crates or boxes to keep them from rolling around during windstorms. One journal mentions a baby being bundled in a saddlebag for security. Hard to say if that's innovative or mildly alarming. Historians still debate the line between frontier genius and frontier desperation. Still, you kind of admire it. That sheer nerve. Let's pack up everything, head into the unknown, and just figure it out. It's not so different from you, really. Sure, your version involves a portable stove and freeze-dried chili, but the impulse, it's ancient. The rain falls a little heavier now. Just for a minute, like the sky remembered something it forgot to say. You listen, letting the sound roll over you. It's no longer about getting to sleep. It's about staying in this moment a little longer. Suspended between centuries, between the beat of raindrops and the rhythm of breath. You fumble for your flashlight again, not because you need it, just because it feels grounding. Click. The beam lands softly on the interior wall, casting dancing shadows of the tree branches above. You trace a line with the light across your backpack, the crumpled snack wrapper, the toe of your boot. Then click. Darkness again. Or at least that warm, watery kind of dark that still glows with moonlight through the canopy and the soft translucence of your tent walls. You smile without meaning to. This is the kind of night you'll remember for no particular reason. Just the feeling of being small, safe, and precisely where you're meant to be. Like a footnote in someone else's great story, and yet still necessary, still real. You lie back, stretch once more, and sigh into the air. It feels like a lullaby that no one had to write because the forest's been singing it for centuries. You wake to a faint glow, soft and ghostly, filtering through the canvas above your head. Not sunrise, not yet. More like the world's dimmer switch got nudged a little. A pre-dawn hush that feels ancient. The rain's let up for now, replaced by a mist that clings to everything like shy applause. You unzip the flap just enough to peek out. The air hits your face, crisp, wet, and impossibly fresh, like it was brewed specifically for this moment in a secret forest teapot. You breathe in, slowly, and watch your own breath cloud up like a ghost deciding whether or not to haunt this campsite. Outside, the trees loom like friendly giants just waking up, their moss-covered arms drooping with moisture. Everything's glistening, jeweled in droplets, the whole world wearing last night's storm like a velvet robe. Your stomach rumbles. Right on cue. You consider your breakfast options, none of which involve croissants or omelets. You eventually settle on a lumpy granola bar, which now has the texture of insulation foam and the flavor of survival. Delicious. You chew quietly, like you don't want to wake the forest. Still wrapped in the sleeping bag, you lean against your backpack and let your thoughts wander back, centuries back, to other mornings, in other tents. Let's talk Romans. Yeah, the empire-building, sandal-wearing, aqueduct-loving Romans. You don't often picture them camping, but they were obsessive about it. When Roman legions moved, they built structured, strategic camps every night. Castra, they called them. Not just tents pitched haphazardly, but organized cities made of canvas and discipline. Every night, wherever they stopped. Historians still argue whether these temporary camps influenced the layout of later European towns, but many believe they did. The camps had roads, drainage ditches, latrines. You're suddenly grateful for your modern toilet arrangements, and even marketplaces. All packed up and rebuilt daily. Imagine that, marching 20 miles, then setting up a miniature city before dinner. No wonder the Roman Empire lasted so long. They were the first to weaponize obsessive organization. You take another bite of your sad granola and salute the ancient logistics team. Roman tents were usually made from leather, processed cowhide, heavy and durable. Each tent housed a contubernium, a squad of 8 men who shared a tent, a fire, and probably some deeply personal knowledge of each other's digestive systems. The tents weren't cozy, but they worked. Protected from the elements, even in Gaul's muddy winters or the scorching North African sun. You picture 8 burly soldiers squashed into a single space, arguing over who gets the dry corner. Someone definitely snoring. Someone definitely stealing someone else's ration of figs. Humans haven't changed all that much. And even in those camps, amidst the discipline and mud and sword oil, there were moments like this. Stillness. That faint glow before dawn. The soldier sitting up first, wrapping himself in his cloak, listening to distant hooves or birds, or just the sound of his own thoughts creaking open for the day. Back in your own tent, your thoughts are briefly interrupted by a drip landing squarely on your forehead. You blink, look up, and sigh. A leak. Classic. You shift your sleeping bag an inch to the right and pretend it never happened. Denial. The real duct tape of camping. Still, there's something kind of magical about mornings like this. Nothing demands your attention, nothing buzzes. No emails, no headlines, no neighbor lawnmower at 6 a.m. Just trees, mist, tent fabric warming slowly in the early light. You hear a bird call, a high, echoing chirp that sounds like it's laughing at you. You smirk. Even the wildlife's got jokes. Probably a robin or a wren. Maybe even something more exotic, depending on where you've decided to plop your tent in the world. Speaking of birds, did you know some indigenous North American tribes used bird bones as tent pegs? Lightweight, strong, and surprisingly effective. A resourceful use of every part of the animal. Historians still discuss whether these materials were practical, symbolic, or both. Either way, it's a reminder. Nothing was wasted. Nothing taken without purpose. You glance down at your own tent pegs, mass-produced aluminum, slightly bent from overzealous malleting. The opposite of elegant. But they're still holding strong, and at 4 a.m. in damp socks, you'll take function over poetry. There's a faint rustle outside. Leaves maybe, or some creature investigating your forgotten snack wrapper. You pause. Then shrug. Unless it's evolved opposable thumbs and a craving for instant oats, it's probably harmless. You decide to shift position, inching closer to the door. You unzip it halfway and stick your head out. The mist is thicker now, swirling around the base of trees, making the forest look half real, like it's being painted in watercolors one tree at a time. You stare at it for a long moment, feeling the cool kiss of fog on your cheeks. A squirrel darts up a nearby trunk and pauses to judge your hairstyle. Fair. You remember reading once about how ancient Japanese samurai would camp under pine trees before battle, not for cover, but for clarity. The silence beneath the trees, the way the mist settled in quiet waves, helped them calm their minds. Historians still puzzle over how much was ritual versus practical technique. But it worked. And maybe it still does. You breathe in again. Long, slow. This isn't battle, but life can feel like one. And this moment in the tent, in the mist, in the hush before sunrise, this is your armor, your pause. You whisper to no one, I needed this. And the forest, the fog, the ancient memory of camps and quiet mornings, they all seem to nod in agreement. You're not quite sure when you fall back asleep. But when you wake, it's lighter. That buttery kind of morning light, where everything's washed in pale gold, and even the mud looks vaguely photogenic. Your neck's a little stiff, and your socks are dryish, which counts as a miracle in the book of camping. The rain has stopped for good, at least for now. There's birdsong again. Layered, cheerful, a little chaotic. Like a forest orchestra where everyone forgot the sheet music but decided to wing it anyway. You unzip the tent flap fully this time. Slowly, reverently, the kind of motion you reserve for big reveals. And there it is. A damp but dazzling clearing, dripping with sunlight and last night's storm. The leaves shimmer. Puddles glint like little mirrors. And the air? Don't even get started on the air. It smells like pine and soil and possibility. You stretch your arms out like you're trying to hug the sky, then groan like a very old hinge. Everything cracks, in a satisfying way. You mutter something that vaguely resembles morning and step out. Your boots squish a little, but that's fine. You stomp them dryish on a mossy patch and take in the full panorama. Your tent, the steaming forest, a snail making a bold journey across a leaf. Everything feels restored, not pristine, but repaired by rest. You set up your little camp stove, grumbling lovingly about the stubborn nozzle. Eventually, it flickers to life with that satisfying whoosh that always feels like a mini triumph. You pop a small pot on and dump in some water, watching the steam curl up like it's stretching too. As you wait for the water to boil, your thoughts wander again. This time to a very different kind of tent morning. Let's sail across the sea, to the Mongolian steppes. You picture endless grasslands, the whisper of the wind across vast plains, and at the heart of it all, a circular felt-covered tent known as a gyr or yurt. Yurts weren't just tents, they were portable homes engineered for efficiency. The Mongols perfected the design. Sturdy wooden lattice walls, collapsible for transport, a conical roof with a central smoke hole. They could be packed up in under an hour, loaded onto a cart pulled by yaks, and set up again before dusk. Beat that, IKEA. And they weren't small. Some could house entire extended families, with sections divided for men, women, cooking, sleeping, and, of course, guests. Yes, even in a yurt, there was a designated guest space. Hospitality wasn't optional, it was law. Historians still debate how much influence the Mongol yurts had on later nomadic cultures across Central Asia. But what's certain is that Genghis Khan's military campaigns moved faster and stayed stronger in part because of those portable homes. His soldiers could sleep comfortably, eat warm food, and move quickly without losing shelter. You sip your instant coffee. Yes, it tastes like hot paper, but it's warm and yours. You imagine a Mongol warrior sipping fermented mare's milk beside his fire, gazing over the plains, probably thinking about conquest or soup. One quirky fact? Yurts were, and are considered spiritual spaces, the door always faces south, and it's bad luck to step on the threshold. There's also a long-standing belief that the central smoke hole connects the earthly realm to the spirit world, like a cozy chimney to the ancestors. You glance up at your own tent roof. No smoke hole, just a mesh vent currently being guarded by a very determined spider. You nod at him. Gatekeeper to your little spiritual Airbnb, the pot boils. You pour it over a foil pouch of something vaguely labeled breakfast hash. It smells like cardboard and ambition. But again, it's warm. You wrap your hands around the pouch like a medieval peasant around a bowl of gruel and dig in. As you eat, you think of Napoleon's campaigns across Europe. Did you know his army had portable field tents custom designed for him? Not just any tent. These things were luxurious for the time. Silk linings, folding wooden furniture. His own traveling chamberlain handled setup. It was the 19th century version of glamping. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's mobile headquarters helped him maintain control, or if they were just a symptom of his increasing need for comfort amid chaos. Either way, you imagine him pacing across a muddy field, barking orders while a servant dusted off his campaign chair. You, by contrast, have a damp log and a piece of paper towel you accidentally sat on. But still, you feel a kinship. You, too, are ruling your kingdom of solitude, even if your troops consist of one squirrel and a worm you accidentally renamed Gerald. You finish your meal, rinse your pot with a bit of water, and dry it off with the least wet part of your sleeve. Efficient, if not elegant. You hang it on a low branch where it glints in the sun like a medal for surviving the night. Now that breakfast's done, there's a certain restlessness, the kind that follows the rain. Everything's still wet, but not in a miserable way. More like the world's been washed, and it's inviting you to come see what's changed. You step away from your tent and wander a bit through the clearing. The forest is alive with post-rain chatter, drips, chirps, the occasional rustle. You spot fresh deer tracks in the mud, a web stretched between two branches, jeweled with dew. You think about explorers again, people who woke up in tents to unknown landscapes every day. People like Isabella Bird, the 19th century British traveler who defied expectations by riding through Japan, climbing the Rockies, and writing best-selling travelogues. She camped in snowstorms, faced bandits, and documented entire worlds from inside her canvas shelter. One time she described waking in a tent to the sound of wolves howling. She lay still, listening, unafraid. Just curious. You feel a little bit of that now. Not fear, just alertness. That primal awareness that happens when the modern world peels away, and you realize, oh right, I'm an animal in the woods. You let your hand brush the bark of a tree, rough and slick at once. You whisper, "Thanks for the roof last night," and move on. Back at camp, the sun is higher. Your tent glows softly, casting little shadows and light patches that dance with each breeze. The spider has gone, hopefully to write about you in his memoir. You sit again, sip the last of your coffee, and close your eyes. There's no hurry, no pressure. The day will unfold however it wants. And you? You've already conquered a rainy night. That's more than enough for now. You're sitting there, nursing the last lukewarm sip of your forest coffee, when it starts again. Just the softest sprinkle at first. A few tentative drops tap the tent roof, like the sky's clearing its throat before a second act. You glance up, half in disbelief. Wasn't the rain done? Didn't nature agree to give you at least one dry morning? Apparently not. But this time you don't scramble for shelter. You've earned your soggy stripes, so you just sigh, stand slowly, and pull the flap shut behind you as you slide back inside the tent. The fabric zips shut with a familiar rasp, like the tent is giving you a sleepy welcome back. You sprawl onto your sleeping bag, now pleasantly aired out, and listen. The rhythm starts slow, scattered, and then gains confidence, building into that same hypnotic downpour that lulled you to sleep the night before. It's different in daylight, less mysterious, more grounding, like the forest is washing off its makeup, returning to its roots. Literally. You pull your blanket around your shoulders, propping yourself up with a bunched-up sweater that's doing a suspiciously good impression of a pillow. Your thoughts begin drifting again, riding the sound of rain like a gentle canoe through time. This time you're thinking about explorers stuck in storms, real, nasty, no-tent-strong-enough storms. Let's start with Captain James Cook. British navigator, 18th century, charted half the Pacific and managed to avoid scurvy while doing it, which, in those days, basically made him a wizard. He and his crew camped often on islands they charted, and more than once they found themselves pinned down in torrential rains. On New Zealand's South Island, for instance, his men once set up rudimentary canvas shelters to ride out a week-long storm, fashioning stakes from local timber and patching holes with torn sails. Historians still debate whether those makeshift camps counted as official military bivouacs or more like please don't flood shanties. Cook's journals describe the rain as incessant, cold, and nearly soul-depleting. You feel that. You really do. You stare up at the curve of the tent, watching the water bead and slide down. Each droplet travels its own unique path, then disappears beyond the edge. It's a bit like stargazing, if the stars were wet and slightly threatening. A mosquito whines past your ear. You wave it off like a snooty concierge. The downside to warm rain? Insects start acting like it's their Coachella. You consider digging out the repellent, but decide the blanket burrito you've formed is enough defense for now. Let's go further back. Ancient Egypt. Not a place known for its rain, right? But when it did rain, especially during freak storms in the desert, it could flood tents within minutes. Nomadic groups like the Medjay, desert scouts who served as protectors of Egyptian trade routes, developed low-slung, sloped tents to let the rare rain run off quickly. They also placed sleeping mats on raised wooden slats. Early anti-mud tech. Quirky fact? Egyptian soldiers sometimes used crocodile dung mixed with mud as an insect repellent. Yup. Historians still argue whether this was actually effective or more of a fear-based tactic to keep bugs, and probably people, at a distance. You look at your can of DEET and feel suddenly very, very grateful for chemical engineering. Outside, the rain intensifies. A sudden gust pushes water sideways, and a small spray finds its way through the tent's mesh near the top. You instinctively shift your blanket higher and pull the zipper tighter, creating a snug little pod of dryness. Your brain, now fully cozy, keeps digging into the archives. Remember the Bedouins? Masters of desert survival? Their tents were woven from goat hair, coarse, tough, and astonishingly clever. Dry, the fibers stayed loose, letting air flow freely. But when it rained, the hair swelled and closed the weave, making the fabric water-resistant. Nature's version of smart textiles. You wonder what it'd feel like to sit in one of those. Hot tea in hand, the sand damp and dark around you, the tent steaming slightly from the inside. The scent of cardamom. A camel huffing softly outside, probably judging you. Historians still puzzle over the oral traditions preserved in these tents. Epic poems, genealogies, tribal records, passed down by firelight. Entire histories spoken aloud, woven into memory like the tents themselves. You reach for your journal, the pages curled from damp air. You jot down a few scattered thoughts. Rain again. Tent equals time machine, and note to self, invent better granola. The pen skips, the ink is stubborn, your hand is steady. There's something quietly satisfying about writing during rain. like the world is too busy being wet to interrupt you. You pause. Let the silence between the droplets say what it wants. Then you keep scribbling. A few more pages in, your thoughts drift toward tent life during wartime. Specifically, World War I. Trench warfare didn't exactly lend itself to cozy canvas retreats, but behind the lines, soldiers often rested in bivouac tents. These were minimal, basically waterproof triangles you could barely sit up in. And yet, in those cramped shelters, soldiers wrote letters, patched uniforms, even played harmonicas to pass time. One popular trench song was called "Pack Up Your Troubles in Your Old Kit Bag," a weirdly cheerful ditty considering the mud, shellfire, and lice. Historians still debate whether such songs actually boosted morale or were just a way to keep from screaming. Either way, they echoed through canvas, rain, and exhaustion. You hum a few notes of your own. Off-key, of course. But it makes you smile. If trench soldiers could find melody in a storm, surely you can hum through this drizzle. Outside, the storm begins to retreat, just a little. The drops space out. The wind dies down. Somewhere in the canopy, water releases in a sudden whoosh, 100 leaves shaking off all at once. The sound is startling, then soothing. You unzip the flap again, just enough to stick out your hand. Rain kisses your palm, then slows, then stops. You look around. The forest is steaming. Patches of fog rise like breath from the earth. The trees glisten like they've been dipped in glass. A raven flaps noisily from a branch and disappears. You whisper, "We made it." To no one in particular. Maybe to yourself. Maybe to the tent. Maybe to all the people in all the centuries who've ever waited out a storm under cloth and hope. And your tent? Still standing? Still sturdy? A little saggy in one corner, sure. But haven't we all? You lie back once more, the fabric warm now under your head. You listen to the quiet after rain, the softest, most luxurious sound in the world. It's sometime later when the forest starts to stretch and yawn again. The rain's moved on, maybe off to hassle another valley, and now all that's left is the slow, steady drip of water falling from leaves, branches, and every inch of nature's scalp. You unzip the flap, this time with the swagger of someone who's been through things, and step outside. The air smells impossibly fresh, like moss tea with a hint of ozone. If someone could bottle this scent, they'd make a fortune, though no one would believe it was called wet ferns and slight regret. You stretch again, because stretching feels different after surviving a rainstorm. You move your arms like an orchestral conductor doing yoga. Everything clicks, good clicks, survivor clicks. Your boots squelch as you walk across the clearing, the ground soft but no longer swampy. Tiny mushrooms have popped up overnight, little beige umbrellas for ants. The air feels charged, like the forest just came out of the shower and is trying not to slip on its own floor. You spot a squirrel mid-panic, fur fluffed into a comical cloud. He's clearly regretting some of last night's choices. You nod in solidarity. And then the idea hits you. That clearing, the one just a bit downhill, that's where you'll go next, just for a wander, just because it's dry enough and you have legs. You gather your things into a lightweight pack, leaving the tent pitched like a loyal dog guarding its turf. You'll be back. Probably, hopefully. Assuming you don't trip over a root and get adopted by raccoons, you make your way down the path, boots finding purchase on mossy rocks and soil that feels like chocolate cake underfoot. And you start to think again about who else walked through landscapes like this, guided by instinct, weather, and the occasional goat. Q. The Neolithic era. Yep, we're going back about 10,000 years. Give or take a few millennia and a handful of woolly mammals. This is when humans started to build more permanent shelters, but tents and mobile homes still played a huge role for many communities, especially in seasonal migrations. Early hunter-gatherer groups likely used frame tents made from animal bones and hides. These weren't just lean-tos. They were engineered marvels for their time. Some even had smoke holes and interior partitions. And while we don't have ancient Yelp reviews of them, archaeological digs have revealed stone circles believed to have anchored the edges of tents, with fire pits and tool caches nearby. Historians still argue whether these early tents were used year-round or just during hunting trips. But what's clear is that mobility didn't mean disorganization. These were people with routines, rituals, and probably a strong opinion about which end of the tent was the door. You step over a small stream, careful not to slip, and catch your reflection in the water. Slightly rumpled, damp at the edges, and utterly at peace. Back to the path. Your next mental hop lands somewhere unexpected. The circus. No, really. 19th century traveling circuses were tent masters. The Big Top wasn't just entertainment architecture, it was a logistical masterpiece. Massive canvas pavilions with masts, guy ropes, and sometimes entire annexes for sideshows, animals, and props. The larger ones could seat thousands and be set up in a single day. A quirky tidbit? Many early circus tents were waterproofed using a mixture of boiled linseed oil and beeswax, meaning they repelled rain and smelled like an antique candle store. You pause in your walk and tilt your head. Somewhere, very faintly, you swear you hear a laugh. Not creepy, just unexpected. Like the woods themselves chuckled. Maybe it's the wind. You keep walking, tracing a lazy curve around a mossy boulder shaped suspiciously like a lopsided bread loaf. That's when you come to the clearing. And, oh, it's a painting. Sunlight filters through broken clouds and hits the clearing like a spotlight. Ferns glisten. Birds flit. The grass is high and wild, speckled with tiny yellow flowers that seem to exist solely to make bees smile. You step in, careful not to crush anything too important. The earth here is springy, the kind of bounce you only get after a long soak. You drop your pack and sit in the center of the field, feeling small in the best possible way. You lie back. Look up. Clouds drift like giant, lazy fish across the sky. And as you lie there, another thread of history weaves into your thoughts. World War II. Specifically, the parachute tents. During and after the war, thousands of surplus parachutes were repurposed as emergency shelters. Thin, strong, and lightweight, these silk canopies were perfect for makeshift tents. Refugees, soldiers, and adventurers alike used them in forests, deserts, and bombed-out cities. Historians still debate how widespread their use really was, but stories abound. Families in war-ravaged Europe draping parachutes over wooden frames. Explorers in South America sleeping under billowing domes of once airborne silk. A parachute tent wasn't just shelter. It was transformation. Something that once fell from the sky becoming a safe place on the ground. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. Just the hum of insects, the creak of tree limbs, the slow inhale-exhale of a world finally done crying. You imagine a parachute tent here, rippling in the breeze, glowing pale white in the sun. You, curled beneath it, reading, writing, existing. And suddenly you're not in a hurry anymore. You're not even planning the rest of your day. You're just here, present, absorbing. You make a mental note. Build parachute tent, or at least Google it. You open your eyes. The light has shifted again. Warmer now, leaning into late afternoon territory. You sit up slowly, brushing leaves from your hoodie. You take one last look at the clearing, trying to memorize it. The kind of place you might dream about later, and not be sure whether it was real. Then you stand, sling your pack over your shoulder, and retrace your steps, the path already a little more familiar than before. Back at camp, your tent waits. Slightly sagged, but noble. You pat its side affectionately, like it's a very loyal, very soggy dog. You unzip the flap, step inside, and let out a breath you didn't know you'd been holding. Another little journey complete, and many more to come. You flop down inside the tent with the dramatic flair of someone who absolutely deserves a snack, and maybe a small parade. The inside smells like slightly damp canvas and the memory of your breakfast, which is honestly a better combo than most scented candles on the market. The rain is just a whisper now, occasional drips tracing lazy lines down the outside of the tent. You're dry, you're content, and your sleeping bag might as well be made of marshmallow clouds. You rummage through your pack, hoping to strike gold, a forgotten granola bar, or maybe one of those fancy trail mix packets that includes exactly 3 chocolate pieces, just enough to emotionally manipulate you. Victory. Half a peanut butter sandwich in a Ziploc that's seen better days. You eat it like it's Michelin star cuisine. And as you chew, slowly, you let your thoughts wander again, pulled gently along by the sound of the forest recovering from the storm. You find yourself thinking about extreme camping, not the trendy influencer kind with fire pits and glamping hashtags, but the kind that flirts with the limits of human sanity. Antarctica. Let that sink in. You imagine yourself there, in the middle of a frozen nowhere, sleeping in a tent that might as well be an origami napkin compared to the wrath of polar winds. Early 20th century explorers like Roald Amundsen and Robert Falcon Scott, names that sound like old-fashioned colognes but were actually real-life frostbitten badasses, led expeditions that lived and died by their tents. Literally. When temperatures dipped to -60 degrees Fahrenheit, the difference between a properly pitched canvas and an incorrectly knotted guy line could mean the end. Historians still argue whether Scott's final expedition failed due to poor planning, bad luck, or simply the brutal indifference of Antarctica itself. But one thing's certain. Their tents became microcosms of survival, places where scientific notebooks were kept beside snow-encrusted socks and boiling water was hoarded like treasure. Quirky fact. Scott's team used candle stubs inside their tents not for light, but to warm their fingers just enough to write in their journals. You pause mid-bite, gazing at your humble tent. Suddenly it feels like a palace. You lie back, chewing the last bite slowly, and listen again. Now the forest seems more awake. Birds have started casual conversation again. Nothing urgent, just small gossip like, "Did you see that squirrel's hair?" or "What's up with the humans today?" Somewhere, a woodpecker drums a lazy beat on a distant trunk, like it's playing backup percussion for nature's jazz band. You think about the Mongols, not because of the woodpecker, though that would be kind of poetic, but because they were basically the ultimate tent people. Genghis Khan's army, sweeping across Asia in the 13th century, carried their homes with them. Gur tents, also known as yurts. Circular, insulated, collapsible, and surprisingly chic if you like your interior design with a nomadic twist. The Mongols could disassemble, move, and rebuild an entire tent village in under an hour. Imagine that as an HGTV show. Extreme Mobile Makeover, Empire Edition. Historians still debate whether Genghis himself preferred his yurt's felt lining to be plain or patterned with tribal symbols. But records show the Khan's own mobile palace had golden fittings and was hauled on a wheeled platform by oxen. A literal, moving mansion. You mentally compare your nylon cocoon to a royal yurt and decide, hey, yours doesn't need oxen. Score 1 for portability. The breeze picks up again. The trees sigh. A fresh round of raindrops tumble off the higher branches and land in soft splashes outside your tent. It's rhythmic, like the forest is performing for an audience of one. You grab your sketch pad and start to doodle. Badly, of course, but with great emotional commitment. A stick figure version of yourself inside a massively oversized Mongolian yurt. Maybe throw in a coffee mug labeled "Can-Do Attitude." You chuckle at your own ridiculousness, the laugh soft and sleepy. As the pencil drags lazily across the paper, you think about your favorite shelter story of them all, the Apollo moon tents. Okay, they weren't technically tents, but the lunar module acted just like one. Picture it. 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin descend onto the moon, unfold a spindly-legged capsule, and camp out for over 21 hours. In space, in a tent, with no bathroom, high risk, no s'mores. Quirky tidbit? NASA originally considered giving astronauts a foldable, inflatable lunar tent in case of emergencies, though it never made it past early testing. Historians still argue whether sleeping on the moon was restful or, like trying to nap in a giant refrigerator full of radio static, as one astronaut later described lunar acoustics. You press your pencil into the sketch pad with a little extra pressure, drawing a cartoon moon tent with a flag that says, "Wish you were here." It's dumb. It's perfect. Outside, the sky starts clearing. A sliver of gold pushes through the clouds, illuminating the edge of your tent like a whispered promise. You unzip the flap and peek out. Everything glows. The trees, the grass, even the puddles look celebratory, like they're raising tiny glasses to toast your survival. You step out, stretch again. Why not? You're basically a yoga master by now. The world is dripping but no longer soaked. Steam rises in lazy tendrils from the ground. The scent of pine and wet bark fills your lungs like a natural lung spa. You take a deep breath. Then another. In a quiet moment of pure outdoorsy drama, you whisper, "This is the life." And it really is, even if your socks are still kinda damp. You decide to walk a little more, now that the rain's fully moved on. Not far, just a short loop around the clearing, enough to shake off the static and welcome in the warmth. As you stroll, your mind starts linking all the stories together. Amundsen in the frost, Bedouins in the desert, Mongols on the steppe, astronauts on the moon, all of them sleeping in tents, all of them watching rain or meteor showers or snow or sand drum their shelters and remind them that they're part of something impossibly big. You, too, are part of that legacy. A one-person, granola-powered continuation of the world's coziest survival tradition. And your tent? It's more than a shelter. It's a stage for thoughts, a pocket of quiet in a noisy universe. It's your rain-drenched, sandwich-scented, slightly lopsided headquarters of peace. You make your way back as the sun slips low. Dusk paints the treetops in honeyed amber. You crawl into the tent once more, pulling the zipper up and the sleeping bag around your shoulders. Tonight, you think, maybe you'll dream of yurts and moon modules. Or maybe you'll just dream of nothing at all. Sometimes, nothing is the best kind of everything. Back in your tent, night settles in for real this time, not the fake-out twilight that promises darkness and then gets distracted. This is the deepening blue, hush-over-the-world kind of night. You're burrowed into your sleeping bag like a human burrito, zipper pulled to your chin, and the fabric around you sighs with the warmth of your body. Outside, the last drops of rain give way to a slow, rhythmic drip from the treetops, like the forest's version of a lullaby. A cricket tentatively chirps. Somewhere to your left, something small rustles, then immediately regrets making noise. Probably a mouse, or a chipmunk, or a very polite ghost. You don't check. You let your breathing slow and your thoughts drift like fog across an old battlefield. Because tonight, you're thinking of tents in the age of empires, specifically the Romans. Sure, when you think of the Roman Empire, you probably picture marble columns and togas, not canvas and guy ropes. But Roman soldiers? They were professional campers. Every single night on the march, their first job was to build a temporary fort, complete with a ditch, ramparts, and rows of tents laid out with ruler-straight precision. These weren't haphazard setups. The castrum, Latin for camp, followed strict grid layouts, almost like pop-up cities. Tents, called papilio, were usually made of leather and shared by 8 men. Tight quarters, strong smells. You're suddenly grateful for your solo setup. Historians still argue whether the soldiers truly disassembled the entire camp each morning or left some structures behind. But what's known is that discipline was key. No one just flopped onto a bedroll at random. Even relaxation was a group project. A quirky tidbit? The word papilio not only meant tent, but also butterfly. No one's quite sure why. Maybe because the flaps looked like wings. Or maybe the Latin poets just had a thing for dramatic metaphors. As your thoughts meander through Roman tent cities, your eyes close for a bit too long. You open them, only slightly startled, to find everything the same. That soft sense of safety begins to settle into your chest again, like a warm rock in your rib cage. Not heavy, just grounding. You roll onto your side, facing the tent wall. It billows slightly with each breeze, responding like a giant, sleeping breath. And then, thunder. Far off, a rolling, lazy growl, not enough to bring a new downpour, but enough to remind you that nature's never really done. You listen. It's not scary anymore. You smile and think of the Sami people, indigenous reindeer herders from northern Scandinavia, who've used tents called lavu for centuries. These cone-shaped shelters are like teepees, with wooden poles and a fire pit in the center. Simple, sturdy, and designed to withstand snow and icy winds. And yes, thunder too. Inside a lavu, the smoke curls up through a top opening, and people sit in a circle around the fire, sharing stories, soup, and occasionally arguing about reindeer names. Probably. Quirky fact: some Sami lavas are still built using traditional reindeer hides, stitched by hand and passed down through generations. Historians still debate how much the lavu influenced the design of other northern nomadic tents, especially in Siberia and parts of northern Canada. What's certain, though, is that these people knew how to live with weather, not against it. You imagine yourself in a lavu, fire crackling at your feet while snow dances outside. And then you remember. You've got your own mini version right here. Fireless, yes, but filled with warmth all the same. You shift again. The sleeping bag rustles like a contented sigh. Another flicker of memory. Another group of tent users. Another time, the Ottoman Empire. Sultans didn't just travel with armies, they brought literal cities on the move. Massive imperial tents with golden thread, velvet walls, and towering peaks were packed and carried across continents. These mobile palaces were symbols of power, diplomacy, and excessive fabric budgets. One particularly famous Ottoman tent measured over 60 feet across and featured multiple rooms, each elaborately decorated. It was a portable Versailles, minus the plumbing. Quirky tidbit? Some of these tents were so large they required professional tent architects. Yes, that was a real job, to oversee their setup. Historians still argue whether the massive show tents were actually used for sleeping or were more like royal PR campaigns with drapes. You chuckle quietly. PR campaigns with drapes. Sounds about right? Then your smile softens. Because beneath all the history, all the empires and expeditions, there's a common thread: Humans building pockets of safety in wild places. Some did it with hide and twine, others with silk and gold. You, with nylon, aluminum poles, and just enough snacks to see you through the night. Outside, something howls. Not close, not threatening. Just a long, echoing note. Wolf, maybe. Or a coyote trying out for an opera. You listen. And then another sound joins in. Rain again. Soft, like fingertips on a drum. Just a curtain of mist drifting through the trees and brushing your tent like a lullaby. You don't mind. You're ready now. Built for this. Your tent holds. You exhale slowly, matching the pace of the drops. Each breath in, the memory of a new place. Each breath out, a little more peace. And as your mind begins to slow, not in defeat, but in surrender, you think about all the people across thousands of years who've fallen asleep just like this, under canvas or hide or silk, listening to weather and wind, dreaming of home or already living in it. It's not so different, really. Then and now. Wild and warm, wet and calm. And so your thoughts trail off, wandering softly out of the tent like invisible campfire smoke. And you sleep. You don't remember falling asleep. 1 minute, your thoughts were dancing between Roman tents and Ottoman palaces, and the next, you're blinking in the dim, early light of dawn. Not quite morning, but no longer night. That soft, mysterious middle space where everything feels like it's holding its breath. You're warm. A little tangled in the sleeping bag, sure, but otherwise cocooned in comfort. You stretch without fully opening your eyes, feeling your joints sigh in relief. Outside, the gentle sound of rain has stopped. The world is damp, still, and wrapped in a misty kind of hush. For a moment you lie there in the tent's muted light, unsure whether you should fall back asleep or start the slow, glorious ceremony that is morning in the wild. Eventually, the thought of hot coffee, or at the very least, lukewarm instant something, wins. You sit up. The tent's ceiling is speckled with dew, tiny droplets catching the weak light like glitter on canvas. You unzip the flap, and a gust of pine-sweet air rushes in, carrying the scent of wet earth, moss, and something else, something ancient. You step outside barefoot, because why not, and sink your toes into the soft, cold ground. The forest is veiled in fog. Everything looks dreamlike, softened around the edges, like nature applied a gentle blur filter. You boil water over your little camp stove, watching the steam rise in twin spirals. There's something almost ritualistic about it. You're not just making a beverage. You're summoning awareness, shaking off the sleep, drawing the line between dream and waking life. And as the mug warms your hands, you think about one last group of tent dwellers, maybe the most resilient of all. Refugees. People who live in tents not for leisure or conquest or exploration, but because they've had to leave home behind. Millions of them. In deserts, in forests, in open fields, or packed into camps. Their tents aren't made for Instagram or expedition glory. They're made for survival, for shelter from more than just the weather. Quirky fact? In some refugee camps, residents have modified standard-issue tents into multi-room homes, complete with solar panels, shelves, and garden patches. Ingenuity refuses to be homeless. Historians still argue whether the global response to modern displacement is enough, or just a well-meaning patch on a much deeper tear. You sit with that thought for a moment, letting the steam from your cup mingle with the mist around you. It's humbling, because even out here, in your little wilderness escape, you're part of a much larger conversation about home, safety, and the things we carry with us. Your tent flaps gently in the morning breeze, now dry, sun-warmed, and golden at the seams. You start packing up slowly, piece by piece, Poles snap into tubes with that oddly satisfying click. The sleeping bag rolls tighter than it ever should. The whole thing collapses, not like a goodbye, but like a promise. You'll be back. You hum as you move. No tune in particular, just the kind of low, aimless sound that means everything's okay. You take time to brush dirt from your gear, shake off leaves, fold carefully. Because out here, even the smallest actions feel sacred. As you cinch the last strap on your pack, you stand in the clearing and take one final look around. The fog is lifting. Sunlight spears through the trees in long, golden beams. Birds are more confident now, chirping like they've rehearsed all night. You smile, and then, as if your brain doesn't want to let go of the tent life just yet, it tosses you one final curiosity. The future of tents. Like, what happens when Mars colonists need to camp? NASA and SpaceX engineers have already started working on habitats designed to be parachuted into thin Martian air and inflated like giant tents. Some are flexible domes with radiation shielding. Others are hard-shelled bubbles with collapsible living units tucked inside. You imagine yourself unrolling a tent on red dust. Bootprints in alien soil, the wind sounding nothing like Earth's. Quirky tidbit? One proposed Mars habitat design includes a self-healing outer layer that seals punctures automatically, like a Band-Aid with a PhD. Future historians, will likely argue over which Martian tent design was safest, cheapest, or had the best view of Olympus Mons. You laugh at that thought and shake your head. A tent on Mars. Why not? With your pack on your back and your feet on soft, springy ground, you take your first few steps away from the clearing. The path isn't clearly marked, but your footprints from the day before are still faintly there, just enough to follow. And so you do. You walk slowly, letting the forest say its long goodbye. Leaves wave from high branches. Ferns part with each step, only to close behind you like stage curtains. The tent may be packed away, but its memory lingers, in your muscles, in your breath, in the calm that's now settled behind your eyes like a second kind of sleep. You are the latest chapter in a story that began before history had ink, a story of shelters, soft rain, and the simple need to feel safe, even when the world outside howls. And just as you reach the trailhead, where the trees give way to sky, and the car feels too mechanical to even look at right now, you pause. You close your eyes. You hear the drip of a forest after rain, the breath of earth, and the echo of countless tents flapping in the winds of time. You smile, and you whisper, "Thanks." Then, gently, you step into the rest of your day. And now, as your mind slows to a hush and your breathing softens, you let go of the trail, the tent, the dripping trees. All of it. Imagine your body growing heavier, as though the sleeping bag around you is made of clouds and gravity and gentle warmth. The forest fades from view, mist folding over it like a page turned in a long, quiet book. You're still there, somewhere deep in the hush of the woods, but also floating just above it. Safe, wrapped in calm, the world dimmed to shadows and sighs. The rain that once tapped your tent has become nothing more than a slow rhythm in the distance, like a lullaby made of time. Even your thoughts are lighter now, drifting like leaves on a still lake. You don't need to hold on to any of them. Let them ripple away. Let your breath be long. Let your jaw unclench. Let your eyes rest. You've walked through thunder, through the chill of wind, through stories of emperors and explorers, and now, finally, you're here, at the edge of dreaming. No more tents to pitch, no more trails to find, just this moment. Still, software safe, sleep.